the right-of-way encroachment discussion.
All right, so if you recall, we had a bit of a discussion in an executive session for some of the other things that are going on in terms of property acquisitions, exploration, et cetera. But one of the things that we talked about had to do with a bunch of right-of-way encroachments that we are going to be dealing with over the next couple of years as we look at some of the road projects that we're doing. And if you go to Sheila, if you go to the next slide, our main purpose of having this discussion is kind of twofold. First and foremost, it's Grand Avenue reconstruction. We started Grand Avenue reconstruction this year. This is anticipated probably to, dependent upon funding, to be a 3, maybe 4-year project that we're going to do a section each year as we're continuing to work east. We will get from the project start to a little bit west of 16th Street this year, which gives us another year where we're probably getting, and that, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, that was 4 blocks?
4 blocks.
Four
About
blocks.
3.5 blocks this year.
3.5, 4 blocks cost us $1 million. So you can chunk it out to say this is about what we have available each year to do this project. So it's going to take some time. Part of the Grand Avenue reconstruction is going to be making sure that we have sidewalks on both sides of the street, as well as parking available. We are going to run into several instances where we have some encroachments, and we'll show you some pictures along the way. The second piece is we're doing reconstruction or repaving of 4th Street through 9th Street from Main Street north, which for the areas that are between Main Street and Grand Avenue, the plan is to put, again, sidewalk on both sides of the street, as well as provide for public parking on both sides of the street. Again, we know that there are a number of encroachments that we're going to encounter along the way, and the purpose of this discussion is to really, from a policy perspective, talk about what are we going to do about it? How are we going to handle those? How do you want us to handle it? I mean, we can be draconian, we can work with people, we can ignore the encroachments. We have any number of options that we can look at. And so if we go to the next slide, Sheila, when you look at 4th Street, one of the encroachments that we're going to deal with is individual who lives on a corner has basically paved the entire corner. They put traffic cones up so that people don't cut the corner, but their improvements have encroached upon the right-of-way. On the photo to the right, you've got some mature growth trees as well as a property fence that all encroach upon the right-of-way. So those are going to be issues when we deal with 4th Street. 5th Street, next slide, we are going to again run into a series of street trees that are going to be on the right-of-way and that are in the right-of-way currently. And the question is, are we going to cut them down so we can expand the road, or are we going to work with the trees to try to maintain them, and what does that do to our plans? There's a trailer that's traditionally parked on 5th Street. That will get taken care of if the parking ordinance is adopted, which also deals with parking of trailers. 6th Street is a little bit less of a problem, but there is a fence that is going to be it is in the right-of-way, and it'll be a problem for us to be able to complete the project as we currently have it envisioned. 7th Street, we have a very wide right-of-way, and we really don't have any encroachments along that, so it's really not going to be a problem. 8th Street, I think you're fully aware of some of the problems that we have with the Corral Mobile Home Park on the east end where they're encroaching onto the right-of-way, and if we do the plans as prescribed, which we are currently in the process of moving forward with. It may require moving of trailers, but it will definitely impact some of the structures that have been built into the right-of-way. There's also an additional spot where a business has expanded their landscaping into the right-of-way, and if we do the road improvements with the sidewalk, we're going to be impacting their improvements. 9th Street doesn't really have a lot of encroachments. We didn't really discover any, so it's pretty limited. It's fairly wide pavement as it currently stands. 9th Street is probably a section that instead of just taking the sidewalk up to Grand Avenue, we would take it all the way up to Orchard. Because that's kind of a main thoroughfare, and we want to be able to walk people up to the park area. And especially with the parking, as we have events and overflow parking, we're going to need the street parking as well. Grand Avenue is probably, I think you've already gone through some of the pain in the past with doing some improvements and having to move people's improvements that they have encroached into the right-of-way. The big issue is going to be, again, the Corral Mobile Home Park, which the vast majority of the trailers are encroaching into the right-of-way. And again, there's a number of mature growth trees that are going to be impacted if we do what we're talking about. So, with that, it's the policy discussion, which is the last slide, Sheila. And it really is our plan at this point, from an administrative standpoint, is from Main to Grand, is to use all of the right-of-way that we have to allow for parking and sidewalks. 4th through 9th, we want to use all the right-of-way that's available to allow for parking and sidewalks where we can, at least from Main Street up to Home Avenue. Again, except for 9th, which will probably put the sidewalks and parking all the way up to Orchard. So there's kind of 3 questions. Well, there's 4, but there's 3 questions to start out with. Is it going to be the policy direction of the town to work around encroachments? Are we going to require the elimination of the encroachment, which we have the right to do because it is our right-of-way? Or are we going to look at this on a case-by-case basis? And then if we're on a case-by-case basis, who's going to be the arbiter or the decision-making body? Is that going to rest with the board, or is it going to rest administratively on your direction? Who's going to be making these decisions? And we're just trying to get out in front of some of this so that ultimately we don't end up in a situation where you have a room full of angry people because we're doing something that is encroaching upon what they've taken over in terms of the property improvements. Director Lundin and myself were talking earlier today about the fact that we probably expand this to include some of our alleyways where people have encroached in, and we need to start cataloging those and then notifying residents that they've put improvements within our right-of-way or our easements. An example is building a shed over our water easement. Well, whose responsibility is when that water main breaks or has to be replaced, whose responsibility for the shed? And I think we need to start putting people on notice saying, hey, your shed is encroaching on our easement or on our right-of-way. If, really when, that water main or sewer main needs to be replaced or it breaks or fails, we're not going to have time to be nice about your shed. Just be aware of that we're going to come in and we're going to fix our problem, and we're going to do it. We're going to do it as quickly as we possibly can. I don't know, Joe. You got any other comments you want to throw out there?
No, we have the easements that have been taken over in quite a few spots. And, if something ever does happen, it limits us on how fast we can repair a problem. So I think we should start taking some of these easements back, and the sidewalks. I believe that we should make our road as wide as possible and make it safe for the residents to walk to and from places, and give us a good surface for driving so that it's not narrow and you can maneuver around town without worrying about running into something or running over a resident.
You're talking right of ways?
Right of ways
Easements,
and
they-
easements. But they have sheds over our easements that we can't have. They own the easement, that is correct. But that easement's got to stay clear so that we can repair our service lines.
Part of it is that we need to make clear that we're not responsible for moving your shed or putting your shed back together. That we have the easement, which means we have the right to do what we need to do on it, regardless of what you do. And it includes landscaping. People landscape over easements all the time and then get angry with municipalities. When the municipality has to come in and do something, they do it with electric companies as well. When they bury electric lines, next thing you know, you've got landscaping over it. They have to replace that line. You're ripping that all back out. So it's a little buyer beware of, hey, if you're gonna put something on our easement or in our right of way, really shouldn't be in our right of way, but in an easement,
So in the last 5 years, we've had people sign encroachment agreements if there's fences or sheds within easements. We haven't permitted anything in the right of way, but we do permit for what's considered temporary structures within easements with the encroachment agreement and the understanding that they would have to remove it. And that, or that the town would potentially knock it down or move it quickly and destroy it, and they would be responsible to replace it.
Like,
That's in
like
the
the new
last
dollar
5 years.
store, the dumpster enclosure.
There's an encroachment
Yeah.
agreement on that.
yeah.
They said that's been
I
5
I
years.
want to just clarify one thing. So the town has rights of way for its streets, and rights of way are what we lawyers call fee simple title. That means you own the land, that's included within the right of way, whether it's 30 feet or 50 feet or whatever the defined width is. And it's not an easement, and the landowners who may have put things in the right of way cannot get easements or prescriptive rights against the town unless if the town has granted them such rights in a written document, i.e. a plat or some kind of other recorded easement agreement. So nobody has the right to put things and maintain things in the town right of way unless the town, through appropriate process and a recorded document, has memorialized that or granted that. I want that to be clear for purposes of the board's consideration. That doesn't mean there may not be practical reasons why you wouldn't grant encroachment agreements to certain things, but as a legal matter, unless the town has on a plat or in an easement given a right to occupy the right of way, no one has that right.
And there was the agreement signed in the past 5 years, but before that, the landowner is notified of the right of way, right? They know that they're building stuff on top of a right of way.
So the easements have been permitted, but not the right of ways.
Right,
We
so-
haven't allowed anybody to encroach in a right of way. But in the last 5 years, easements have been, encroachment agreements have been made for people building temporary structures and easements. Prior to that, I don't know, it could have been a free-for-all.
Yeah, we have
I doubt
other,
there's much notification of.
Yeah.
yeah, we have other instances where we have right of way that we're not using that has been significantly encroached upon by adjacent landowners.
And I'm
Whether
just
it's
wondering
parking
if-
vehicles or, I'm not sure they built any structures in there, but
And I don't know if it should be a consideration, but I was just curious if anyone could sort of say, we didn't know that the right of way was there. But I mean, it seems like something that's Attorney Sawyer shaking his head. No.
I'll let Attorney Sawyer talk about the ignorance of the law.
Right, so, and that's, I mean, I guess that was kind of my point, and even if someone did try and claim that, I don't know if that would be something that should be considered if the sidewalk needs to go there, or if you need to tear it up to repair something that's a situation then.
Yeah, I mean, we do
obviously.
have a lot of instances in town where people don't know where their property lines are, but, and they try to ask us, well, can you come mark the property line, or can you, we always redirect them and tell them that they have to hire a surveyor to do that. And so some of that is just people needing to educate themselves.
Yeah, because the
more.
last thing we want to do is say, oh yeah, sure, we'll come out and do it, and then do it incorrectly, and then we're in a whole mess.
Yes.
Yeah. And
I think the board should consider encroachments in a couple of ways. So again, and I do want to stress, encroachment agreements are licenses. They are not easements. And this gets into legal semantics. An easement is a permanent relationship. A license is a temporary one. We give encroachment agreements that are temporary in nature, so they're licenses. To my knowledge, we have not been giving easements in the town right of way. But I think there's two kinds of encroachments that I generally see in municipalities. There are encroachments that date back 100+ years to when people didn't have access to surveyors, and it was, the town was developing and people thought they were building on their lot, but I'll be damned if the 6 feet of the house isn't over the boundary line and actually in the right of way. Those types of things generally get licensed in a somewhat more permanent way, so that unless if the structure is taken down or is significantly modified in a way where it can be taken out of the right of way, generally that structure gets to remain. Then there are what you saw the photos of, and that is people just like, oh, I want to have asphalt or landscaping or whatever out to the asphalt road. Well, the asphalt road was built, 70 years ago with the funds that the town had available, and they didn't have money to pave all 50 feet, so they paved 30 feet and people landscaped out to it. That does not give them a permanent right to maintain that landscaping. Or a fence, or a shed, or a mobile home. And so the board has the ability to, as Jim is asking, give direction about what should be done about those kinds of improvements, especially in light of where the town is now going in and making permanent improvements. In other words, if someone has a shed or a mobile home that encroaches into where a sidewalk is supposed to go, and that rerouting that sidewalk means that now you're dramatically changing the engineering plans for an entire right-of-way improvement. Well, maybe it's time for them to move that structure. As kind of painful as that may be for the owner, they are the ones who didn't get a survey and located the structure in the town's right-of-way to begin with. So.
yeah, and on I guess a side note, for example, the town board over the years has vacated certain places like alleys and stuff like that. Like my driveway, for example, way back when it was a driveway, but there's a town irrigation and sewer main that runs through it. So back in 1992, the town board vacated that alley. So yes, technically that alley is my property. I own it, but the town reserved a 15-foot wide right-of-way so they can access their sewer and irrigation. So just something else to think of. And yes, I can't build on it just because obviously there's a water and sewer line there.
When we could specify certain locations you can build on, but if it must be temporary, and if you build, just know it might get destroyed. And then other spots we can say nothing is built here whatsoever, right? I mean, we have obviously the ability to do that. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's pain. It is painful. That's the word I think of for sure, because enforcing it, something like that, because
And
people don't want to move their stuff.
As I say, I think it's gonna be one of those things with the right of ways, if we're gonna have a plan for the sidewalks and stuff, we need to be consistent regardless of how painful it may be for certain individuals or whatnot. Because if we make an exception for one person because it's harder to move their stuff than it is for someone else, that's not fair. We need to be, I think it's important that we have more of a consistent plan on it than doing well, that shed's gonna be hard to move, so we'll leave it alone, but this tree, even though they've had it for however long, it's gonna go. That type of, I think it's just consistent, we just consistently follow it. And then also, because you're gonna have sidewalks there and they zigzag around, and that's just gonna look bad.
And that's true, but the only problem is we've already allowed encroachment agreements, so, we
But an
can't.
encroachment agreement is, we can give them notice, it's an agreement for a
Yeah.
period of time. And when they signed that, they knew that it wasn't permanent.
Yeah,
It
I see
wasn't until we decided to do something with it. Well, now's the time.
the encroachment agreement is them acknowledging that.
That they're,
Like, to me,
encroaching on,
that's good notice. That they, if they signed that, then they know what they're in for
Yeah.
on that.
Yes, and
Versus
no,
the
I mean,
people
and
before,
you
that's
guys
why I
are
was
right.
asking.
And I'm just thinking of the fact that, okay, if somebody knows about it, they'll be like, well, how come you're not allowing me to do it when you let the guy across the street do it? I'm just thinking, in an effort to make things fair.
And that's why I'm saying we just are consistent with it, and we don't do it case by case. I don't think we should do a case by case basis, because that's gonna get messy.
Yeah, but then I was kind of thinking, I mean, do we allow a certain percentage or something? If you take, if it's the road's 100 feet wide and you allow 2% or something. I'm just thinking out loud, just because, okay, for the miner's claim, that freezer, it's on the town's right of way, but how far is it out? Is it only out like a foot or so? And that's what I'm saying. Is something like that, would that be allowed because it's only a minimal amount? Do we do something like, okay, a certain percentage is allowed, or just none at all? Because at the same time, okay, say we make him move his cooler. Where does he put the cooler? Even though it is encroaching on the town's right of way, I understand that, and it should have been addressed when he put the thing up, but. I think there might be some instances where it might benefit just to allow that little bit. It's, and like I said, I'm just kind of throwing out ideas, thinking out loud. But it almost seems like we may have to have certain. I know, it's difficult. We might have to have a case-by-case basis on some of these.
I'm a little concerned, well, I'm more than a little concerned about if someone has to comply and they financially aren't able to. That's my big concern.
When we
I mean,
did,
it's not my only concern.
when we did Grand Avenue, the trail on the north side, the town did pay for moving the fences out of the easement, out of the right-of-way, and we reinstalled the fences. Just for that reason. Some of them got highly upset, some of them understood. They thought it was their property, all the years they'd lived there. But we did reinstall their fences, just put them back on their property line.
And that's a generous policy, and I think that if we have a policy that addresses that issue, that's one thing. Where I think convenience, how convenient to alter our town plans, I think is one consideration, but if someone's really struggling, then I think that should be a primary consideration, in my opinion, just so that people aren't,
Yeah.
How do we apply it?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just
Right,
saying
'cause
that's a.
go back to Miner's claim, he says this is an undue burden. How are we going to define it if, my point is, it creates a slippery slope. We make one exception, to your point, Justin, it leads to 2 to 3 to 4. How do they demonstrate that it's a strain on them to do it? It becomes an even more complicated process.
Well, like if someone's indigent, for example, and they're on a very low fixed income, and they have to relocate something, that would be very expensive.
Right, but it takes them time to try and prove it, and then we have to verify it.
Right.
There's a lot of steps, and now a 3 to 6 month process is 18 to 24 months. And meanwhile, the rest of the sidewalk is going in. I worry about the case-by-case process, because then everybody's gonna make an appeal for it, whether it's valid or not, and in some cases it will be. But how do we manage that at scale such that this work can get done?
Maybe we make it so people apply for the help to get the fence reinstalled. So the original fence is going away. Deal with it. But then you can apply for, I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to brainstorm because that is a concern I have. But, I mean, I also see your point. So,
And once we do it for neighbor A, the one right next door says, wait a minute, they're indigent, but I'm not. It gets us into
Yeah.
this very slippery slope of deciding who's eligible for this aid and who isn't.
yeah, and that's a big, that's.
At the core of this is that they built something somewhere they weren't supposed
True.
to.
I'm fine with the town, paying to have fences moved and things like that, just because the town did do it on Grand, and did the town do it on Orchard as well when that was redone? There probably weren't as many fences.
There weren't as many fences on Orchard.
Yeah, but just to help people out, I'm fine with us,
And that's so
paying
great.
for moving the fence.
We
And then to
did it
Derek's
on
point, though, we
Hall
don't wanna-
Avenue.
Yeah,
But
The town into a situation
Well,
where
the
we
gentleman who
can't-
paved his corner. So now we're gonna pay to tear that up?
Well,
This is my point. We start
Yeah.
doing it on a case-by-case basis. It never ends.
well,
But the thing of it is, you're gonna have to realize that, yes, from to this day forward, whatever, we're gonna have to set a time, we can't, any more allowance. But the previous stuff, we're gonna have to be real careful, like you're talking, that's Gary Hawes. He's been here, one of the founding fathers. I'm sure the town let him, it's gonna be hard for you to go and tell him that after 60 years, we're gonna tear that all out, because he was told he could do it.
So then do we implement some sort
Well,
of a
but I'm just saying,
statute
we're
that
gonna have to
if
be
you're here
careful,
more
like you
than
said,
X
on it.
number of years, you can do whatever you want?
Well,
How do we, I appreciate the
we
exceptions.
just can't,
How do we define a policy that applies to 3,600 people based on 4 or 10 or 100?
But I still think we can do a case by case and work on some of these workarounds somehow or another. We have to be a little thoughtful on some of this process. And understand some of that's in the wrong, but
yeah, I don't know. I mean, yes, I'm more kind of thinking case by case, because yes, I mean, obviously if your building is 10 feet in the way,
Right.
it's a bunch, but if your building's an inch over the line, I feel we shouldn't bother people if it's, that close.
Then how do we counter the argument that it's preferential treatment?
That's a good question.
I
but-
think if it's measured by the impact on the town itself, if it is half of an inch or however, however size it is.
Yes, I'm exaggerating,
We would, that the town should look at it and measure the impact for the town and present that as an impact to the town, not as a way of serving, but I'm not totally in favor completely of on a case-by-case basis. I would like for us to be with the originated plan and then use the town's experience to say if the measurement it is of a greater impact, it is going to make an architectural impact that's going to be major for the town, and have the town advise us of those those fightbacks and those impacts, and tell us from the town, because that's who we are defending. We are defending the overall master plan process. Yes, we want to see the town having some kind of structure that's not sideways, that the sidewalks all over the place. We need to implement a structure. We need to make decisions for the town in a whole, looking at how the town is going to look going forward. There will be difficult decisions to be made along the way, but then having the Joe telling us, hey, this is going to impact majorly if we do open up this right away for this particular, individual, or this will not be of a greater impact, and be advised by the town, by the people who are out there with their architect, And then on those cases, if the impact is minimum, then, bring back to us, but have Joe also analyze the ones that will have major impact and really advise us, hey, we are receiving feedback on this. This is going to have a major impact for the town in a negative way. I don't suggest we make any changes. Kind of like work that way, or keep an open discussion with the mind frame that the plans in place is what we are looking for to follow primarily. So it's not that we are going on case by case, we are just serving the town's best interest overall.
That's a good point. So I'm going to ask for a best guess, Joe or Jim. How many cases will we have of someone encroaching for the upcoming scope of work? Again, best guess.
Well, for instance, 8th Street. We have 2 trailers encroaching on 8th Street from Home to Grand, and the cooler at Miners Claim from Main to Grand,
And the landscape.
and the landscaping.
So there are, on 8th, from Main to Grand, there are 4.
And that's first starting the
So 4 to
project?
6 per street? Would that be a fair
Street, 4
guesstimate?
to 5,
Yeah,
yes.
I would say probably in that 2 block, you'll have 4 to 6 encroachments.
Times how many streets we were talking about this year?
parking will
3?
improve.
4th to 9th Street.
4th to 9th.
That's-
and
And
Grand.
sideways
Well,
measure.
again,
Sideways.
that's part of the policy. We're working under the assumption that we want sidewalks on both sides of the street, and we want parking on both sides of the street.
Yes, I agree to both,
That
yes.
benefits the
And
person.
and so
Absolutely
then
need
the question becomes, if that's the policy that the board wants to move forward with, that's what we'll design. And then we'll have to deal with the encroachments. And, there's a process that we can go through where we involve the community a lot more if that's something that the board is desirous to do. It takes us longer to get a project from design to bid to completion, but, we can, if need be, we can hold community meetings when we have a design of a project, and then everybody gets to see what's gonna happen along the way. I think Trustee Klassen brought it up that he wanted to see our street plans on the website, so people can look at them. Taking it a step further would be actually having a meeting where we're sending a letter out to all the property owners saying, hey, we're gonna have a community meeting we're gonna be doing your road. Come in and see what we're gonna be doing and how it's gonna impact your property.
When is this work scheduled to begin?
8th Street, we've applied for a federal mineral lease grant for a portion of it. And we should know by the end of April.
I think that's a good
April,
idea.
So it could be
because
three- could be
that
3
will
months.
help us prepare to
Yeah,
what's
and then
coming. Yeah.
Have to go out to bid, and depending on, how much we get from a federal mineral lease grant, or if we get one. And then we may end up, if we don't get the grant, we may only go from Main to Home and just do it in-house with our staff doing sidewalks.
I think if we announce what type of changes we are doing, it'll give people the chance to come and either email us, and it'll give us a chance to come up with a response and the reasons why we are doing what we are doing on that specific spot. And if they want to come in and have a discussion or make a public comment, they can. Even if it's publicized somewhere where it's accessible, since community meetings may take up a lot of time, that could potentially help, because then we can discuss the overall plan and just make it clear, and it's not just like we are doing a major project and we are not communicating fully publicly. It's allowing people to listen if they want to and talk and defend their ideas and get feedback from other people. But it's the word that I'm looking for, transparency.
With the
Yeah.
federal mineral lease grant, you do have, with the traditional grant, you have 2 years to complete that project. It's not like you have to get it done within 6 months or a year. You have 2 years to complete the project.
And I think at the very least, we need to notify everybody that, yes, you are encroaching, and, even if it's a road we're not working on this year, just so people are aware of, hey, this is what's happening, this is what's coming down the line, just to kind of get people to think about moving their stuff.
Well, definitely, yeah, you want to have
No.
communication, because you don't want them to hear about it when we're out there moving their stuff.
Yeah.
Or when you start digging this for the sidewalk in their yard, and they're like, wait, what's going on here? They should have already heard about it well before that.
Yeah, like good notice
Yes.
about what's gonna happen and encouraging people to contact us if they're having difficulty, but I appreciate, that it sounds like you guys work with people in those instances. So ultimately, I mean, this is a core downtown section where people they should be happy that there's sidewalks and roads. It's like our core downtown. So I feel that it's
Exactly,
totally
yes.
necessary, and it's not that shocking that it would be happening.
The improvements are going
We
to
need to
be
do it.
well worth the inconvenience of people moving stuff.
Says the guy that doesn't live there where it's being inconvenienced.
I don't know.
I'm just being,
I
Yes,
guess
yes, I know.
but that's the thing is, but you could have the town meetings,
I'm unqualified.
and someone could come in and say, if it's not on my street, do whatever you need to do, I don't care. But then when you get to the street and it impacts my house, oh no, this
Yeah.
can't happen.
I like this sort of hybrid approach or dual approach that you both mentioned, and that is we do public notice. I'm sorry, three of you. I didn't include you in that, Andrea, as well as Kim. We do public notice to everybody, but we also specifically message the people we know are encroaching. We know that are in the right of way, and say, you are going to be impacted by this. Give them a more, let's call it urgent message, a more specific message. You should come to this meeting, see the master plan, see the initial general schedule, let's call it, and we can start to discuss what your needs are going to be related to the requirements of change that you will have to get done. I think if we specifically target them, as you suggested, Chris, we're going to get a better attendance, right? Because otherwise they get the general thing in the mail, or they see it on the board and they're like, whatever.
Yeah.
And then they realize when shovels are showing up and their sheds being caved in by a tractor that, oh, wait, that did apply to me. And it's too late for
Yeah.
them to get any help.
And also to the ones that are on top of like a water or sewer line, because years ago when I was in Public Works, we had that one where the sewer line broke by the ditch, and the guy had built that shed there, and I don't remember the details, I don't think he was willing to move it, so we moved it, but we couldn't repair the sewer break until the shed was out of the way.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah.
And we did not put it back.
Yeah, we didn't put it back.
I think it's
Well,
a good
sometimes, I
plan.
mean, you can't park in a fire lane. There's some things you just have to keep it clear, right?
Well, you can park in a fire lane at
Well-
your own risk.
Yeah. Your car might get creamed,
Your,
but.
your car might have broken windows and might be flooded, but
If you've ever lived in the city, you know how that ends. When I lived in Boston, they would literally just break the two front windows and run the hose through it. That was just it, because they were going to put the fire out. Your car was just an inconvenience.
yep.
Yeah.
Right.
But 10 seconds, problem solved for them.
If
Not
they
so
didn't
much,
just
not
use
so
the-
much for you.
If they just use the engine to move the car out of the way as well.
Well,
time.
the best part was the inside of
It's
the car
time.
being flooded.
Easier to just go,
Yep.
so, anyway.
It sounds like a good plan.
Okay.
I do have some concerns about the case by case. I appreciate there are exceptions where it is going to be applicable, but we need to be very careful about it, everybody not coming up with a justification for why they can't do it, or why it's going to take 6 times longer, or why they're exempt.
Okay.
We need to make, I mean, how much effort are we putting into preserving trails on the waterfront and all that other stuff? These are the sidewalks that are going to get those people up into the community and down to the waterfront. They're going to get kids to school. We're talking about mass transportation and more housing. These are the literal pathways that all of those things are going to need. We can't have too many exceptions.
Yep, I totally
Yeah,
agree.
we have to do something, because unfortunately it's gone on this way for too long, and now.
Right. We're in the unfortunate position of
Setting
sitting
the
in these
right
chairs now and
precedent.
having to make difficult choices that were handed down previously.
Yep,
The worst thing to do is nothing.
yep.
Okay, I think we have a pretty good idea what you want us to do. We'll try to implement it, or we will implement it.
There you go.
to some degree.
No, I didn't say that.
Yeah, communication, follow design plan, follow up with minor changes with low impact to town that people may be requesting, and I think that sounds like, yeah, we'll be good.
I like that we've got a lot of time. I appreciate, I'll bring it up now, where we have a long period of time to make people more aware, to have those public interactions, to help the outliers with their exception cases, and do what we can to mitigate the costs or the inconvenience or the stress and strain of having to make the change.
There you go.
Okay.
Next item,
Next item.
site development.
So we are in the process of starting to look at rebuilding our website, our rather ancient website. Town management team spent some time talking about kind of what the website needs to be. And it really, first and foremost, has to be the go-to place for people to get information about the town. And that includes meeting, packet, agendas, packet, information just generally about the town, our boards, committees, commissions, the various departments, what projects are going on in town. I mean, really, there should be a page right now that talks about Grand Avenue. Here's the current set of plans. Here's the sections that we're doing. Rebuilding Community Park. There should be a project that people can go see what's going on with that, where we keep the information updated. Obviously, it's the repository of all things Silt when it comes to events, whether it's the Easter egg hunt or Halloween or the parties at the pavilion. That's where people need to go get that information. The records, our records need to be out there. That's an interesting concept because we could go broke putting all our records out there. And how we do that is a different piece. And then, a lot of sites have a kind of how do I section, which is really getting at, the forms, licenses, permits, everything we're doing, you ought to be able to do digitally on our website. You shouldn't have to necessarily fill out a piece of paper, drop it off. It should be an electronic form that people can download and fill in. Director Centeno has been working on bringing Cloud Permit online. There's been a few glitches with that, but any website needs to be able to integrate with Cloud Permit. It needs to integrate with our bill paying, Express Bill Pay. People need to be able to pay their utility bills online and do everything that they need to do. We need to have links to other resources. Obviously, you need links to Garfield County. You need links to the court system. You need links to our county commissioners, our state delegation, our federal delegation. All those types of links and information need to be on and accessible in the website. And, in that, we have to build a structure that isn't built off of government speak. We do a horrible disservice to our citizenry because we talk in a certain language and the average citizen doesn't speak that language. They know what we're talking about when we drill down, but they need to be able to find things in the language that they're understanding and comprehending. So kind of that's the basis of where we're headed. A big issue that we're going to be dealing with is the conversion of our paper records to digital records. And one of the questions that we're going to have is, how far do you want to go back? Do you want to go back? Do we chip away at it a little bit over time? I think there will be a certain amount of culling records that if we only need to keep a record for 7 years, then somehow we got to get rid of that record after 7 years. It's got to go away. Obviously, there are certain records that are permanent that we have to maintain. I think probably in the building and community development department, records that run with the land or regarding, building permits, the original plans, et cetera, those are important to maintain forever and keep in a structure that I should be able to go and put my tax key number in or check an address and be able to get all sorts of information on that property. From when the structure was built, some of this is Garco tax records or assessment records, but we have to kind of integrate how we're going to deal with that. I think one of our big challenges is going to be translation. I included in the memorandum that we did not include in our RFP for the housing needs assessment that the report needed to be translated into Spanish. Well, that's a $4,000 ticket if we want it. So we are asking for a summary that we will translate into Spanish rather than the entire report. Should we be putting the entire report out there in Spanish? Maybe. Something for us to consider. The other piece in terms of that we've been kind of monitoring is the accessibility standards that the state put in place a little over a year ago. I think it was the last legislative session. Communities are spending anywhere from $15,000 to $60,000 to have people on staff to make sure that everything's accessible. And it's the chatter on the CML listserv has been rather interesting, and there may be some efforts to try to dial some of that back because it was an expensive, unfunded mandate that the state handed down. So that's kind of the general look. We did kind of peek at a number of our neighbors and a number of communities in terms of who they're using for their website. There are several that use Revise, one that uses Aptigee, and then a number that use Civic Plus. Those seem to be the three main firms that are out there that do kind of the website hosting and design work, and they all pretty much look rather similarly to one another. Obviously, all the Civic Plus ones look the same. All the revised ones look very similar. Graphics are different, pictures are different, but that's easy to do. So the kind of wanted to put out there what we see the website needing to be able to do, but I think one of the first orders of business that we need to do is we need to have a discussion about branding, identifying what the town is, what we want to portray out there. I am not an advertising expert. I'm not somebody that can walk us through branding. I have talked to an individual that has done this type of work, and the process that individual outlined would be on it takes about 6 months for you to do it, and it'll cost in the $30,000 range. I haven't explored anybody else, but I think that's probably one of our first steps is to start really talking about what we are and what we want to be. This all leads into some of the work we're going to do that's going to come out of the housing needs assessment, which is relooking at our comprehensive plan. This all feeds into the same thing. But there's no point in creating a new website if we don't know what we're going to be when we grow up and what we're going to call ourselves. So I throw that out there for general discussion.
I love the branding. It's so irresistible little town. I like to have the vision of eventually having diverse restaurants in town, having the connection with the pedestrian bridge and the plaza. I can see small little concerts happening downtown, more stores connecting both sides of the town. I like that feel for sale because there's so much diversity here. so many people from different areas of the valley are now here in Silt. And I think we have the ability to build the basis for a town that has some level of attractiveness for all of these different diverse type of people that we can attract.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of talked about photography on the website, but I do think of imagery of people enjoying the town and
Nature.
diverse type groups of people and diverse activities. Somebody riding a bike, somebody picking produce at the Highwater Farm, somebody at the coffee shop, whatever, and family fun and outdoor fun, I think, are things that are big for me here.
And for the website itself, definitely not an overpopulated website, just a website that can just, take them to where they need to be, but being very purposeful in the sense of if you overpopulate a website, it's almost overwhelming for the viewer. To be mindful of that.
I mean, everything that you guys have written down, I like all of it, personally. And yeah, on a side note, Cloud Permit, I use that for the historical park. Yes, I used the wrong form, but it's actually it's very easy to understand. So I do like that.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I've mentioned it before. Yeah, I don't know how many years we need to keep information, but there have been times when, okay, we had a board meeting 3 years ago, and I'm like, what on earth was talked about at that board meeting? Just because it comes up 3 years later, and I'd like to go back and to be able to look that up and say, oh yeah, this is what we talked about. Because I think right now, we're only going back 2 years right now.
Is there a time required?
correct.
Is it?
We go back a year just for what's on the website because we're limited on storage space.
Storage space.
So just from a branding perspective, Parachute is the western gateway to the Rockies. Glenwood doesn't show anything. Rifle doesn't show anything.
No, but they have the pool, so it's kind of,
Yeah, and
they don't have to.
as you, Newcastle just trademarked Authentic Colorado, or wasn't it?
Authentically Colorado.
Authentically Colorado.
Well, I think of Gateway, which already I guess is taken maybe, but because we have, if you go in any direction from Silt, we have something awesome to do, whether it's the Flat Tops or Maroon Bells or whichever direction. So to me,
A
that kind
central
of
place for fun.
yeah, something like that. I don't even, but to me and there's just so many different activities, in any direction.
The hub
Your
of
connection to the best
hub
of the West.
Colorado River Valley.
Yes, this is
Your
good stuff.
connection.
Have a little wagon wheel, and we're the hub, the center, and the spokes all go out from us.
Right.
I don't know.
We got to break all the spokes so they stay in the hub. So,
And we've got such good, community, family, pictures of our events at, all that we have going on for such a small town, I think is pretty remarkable. I don't know how to put that into a sound bite necessarily.
That's why I think you need somebody to
Yes.
help
Right,
us
someone who
put
does
it
that.
into a sound bite.
Yeah.
I think we can sit around and
Yeah.
come up with ideas,
Not good at
but
it, no.
not necessarily get to where we need to be.
Right, right.
what does the IT guy say?
He's on spring break. We definitely need a branding person. I think 6 months is a long time to spend doing a brand development exercise. I think if we work with someone who's local, we can probably speed up the time frame and simplify the process because they already know about Silt intrinsically. What they do is they have a bunch of different analyses. They do keyword analyses, sentiment analyses, things like that. So it builds this word cloud, if you will, of possible terms. And then they put them together into short phrases, and then we pick from the list and decide which one we like best. That's sort of an overview of how the process works. But I think going back to working with someone local, small business, I think that in and of itself is a good branding exercise, working with local businesses to do these types of things, and it should speed up the process and make it cheaper for us to do. That's what I would advocate. Maybe the individual you spoke with is a local,
They are,
but not a local we've worked with previously.
correct.
In terms of the site itself, in addition to all the things you mentioned, we've got the police department currently has their own site. That needs to be brought in. Discover Silt is a separate digital entity. That needs to be brought in. Other signing up for sports and things like that, and then putting those schedules online and being able to communicate out from the website to tell people when things that they've signed up for are happening. So integrations in terms of how the website works.
And developing the mobile deposit, I mean, bank, talk mobile deposit all day long. Seriously, the mobile device.
Well, we've got Text-to-Gov now. It needs to integrate with that, for example. Those are just some of the integrations.
No, you're right. We're too spread out right
It's
now.
going to need to have some sort of they call it agentic functionality where, how can I help you? I want to, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
blah, and then it routes them. That's functionality that I think at least 2 out of the 3 platforms you mentioned already have. Some other things to consider in terms of vendor selection. Obviously, Spanish translation, that's $199 a year for G-Translate. We don't need to pay someone to do that. We can do that ourselves. ADA compliance, in addition to the state requirements. There are a lot of unsavory lawyers out there who just scan websites and find ones that aren't ADA compliant and then threaten to sue. So you have to settle with them. So that's something, and we want it to be compliant so that anybody who wants to can use the site. Vendor-specific stuff, SLAs, we need service level agreements. If we're going to buy into a platform, we need to know what kind of support are we going to get. Is it chat? Is it email? Is it phone? Phone would be preferable. We need training for the staff to be able to add more content. We want to make sure that training is ongoing. We want to make sure that it's PCI compliant if we're going to do online payments. We want to make sure that the data is exportable. So they have their own database in the back that tracks everything. But let's say you want to reach out to a bunch of the parents whose kids signed up for sports. You want to have the ability to just pull out a certain segment of that data and put it into MailChimp or whatever, SendMail, whatever platform you use to communicate. So data exportability is another big one. And a lot of these platforms, I didn't look at these 3 specifically for this, they lock their data down. And then you pay to extract it once. So it becomes prohibitively expensive to do over and over and over again. So we'll want to make sure we have the ability to pull the data out as we need. The last thing we want to ask is, when we want to add new features, are we required to use their own in-house developers? Another thing with platforms is they say they'll sign you up very cheaply and the subscription is very cheap, but any changes to the website are $275 an hour. And you just it's another thing that's just death by 1,000 cuts because we're always going to be making changes to the site, as we just described. So we just want to know what that cost structure is going to be for those changes.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree with you, Jim. The first step is really coming up with a cohesive brand strategy because it's going to apply to our printed media. It's going to apply to all of these events and meetings we want to have about stuff coming up and how we disperse it, the website, everything. It really changes the town's identity as a whole.
I mean, I think I've mentioned this, but in Castle Rock, anytime there's a public hearing for a property development or change, they slap up a for sale sign with a QR code, takes you right to everything that's going on with that. And it's actually very easy to go, oh, what's going on in this corner? And you find out very quickly what it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's a rather slick way to engage the public in a very simple way that it's not arduous for them to have to go try to search something.
Yeah, for example, the housing needs assessment, we would just make a QR code for it, post it on the site. And they can just go and get the whole document. Have one QR code for English and another QR code for Spanish. That's a perfect use case. We don't have to publish the whole document, we just link to it. And most platforms have document, what are they called? They're called TTL, so you can set up a document to have a 2-year lifespan. And then the database in the back end just automatically deletes it after 24 months. You don't have to manually manage what's on there for how long. You can set up a lifespan for that documentation.
Okay.
I was gonna say one thing that is not at all as technically savvy as anything you just said, but when I was perusing these websites, some of them there's all the sort of business in the front. It's like, here's your board meetings and here's your utility, and people will go find those things. So I think if we put there was one where I looked at it and the community button is way over off in the corner, and then you have to go find that. And so I think we should start with the fun, have that more, the promotional stuff on the front side of the website. Some of these providers, it just looks like they sort of put the utilitarian items on the front of the homepage of the website, and I didn't.
I'm
think
sure, I shouldn't say I'm sure, but I would assume we could order those tabs any way we want them.
We can.
I think most people think the business first and the fun later. And I'm not, that's not an opinion one way or the other. I don't discount we should be talking about what makes Silt fun or enjoyable, or why do you want to live here? It's all these things. By the way, you can do all the government and all the business stuff over here.
Yeah, and I think about when I'm perusing a website, I want to see, if I'm browsing it, I want to see the fun stuff. If I'm there for the purpose of finding the board meetings, I'll find them,
Yeah.
if they're accessible.
To both of your point, I think the website needs to be attractive looking and purposeful. And however we decide how those tabs, happen as far as utility and some photographs, I think we can accomplish both of these.
And a branding expert can participate in that design process as well. Again, going back to the sentiment analysis aspect, they'll say, based on the data we've gathered, 55% of your people are here for fun and events, 40 or 30 are here for finding out about how to pay bills, and others are business owners or other separate people from far away that are just curious about X, Y, or Z, or they link to it from social media. So when we see that data, that helps drive the design of the menuing, which pages are prioritized. We can also use analytics from our current site to see how are people using the site now. How many people go to these pages versus those pages? And as a baseline, we would prioritize those on the new site because we know that's what our existing users are already doing on the site. Build for the guest you have.
I would suspect that we don't have
Yeah,
a
they're
wide,
walk-ins.
wide use of our site.
They come in and get the forms, a lot
Well,
of different things.
The analytics will also show these are pages that no one's gone to in 7 years. Let's not add it to the new site because then it's just noise. It's a good way to thin the herd and say what pages do people care about and get rid of the rest. Yeah. I think, again, a strong brand analysis will help us in a
Moving forward.
lot of the process.
And is that separate from the website designer? Right.
Yes. They work
Branding
together.
is Silt as a whole.
Basically, the branding person will get us to the point where we can say, all right, web designer, this is what we want. Basically.
And if it's a predefined platform like one of the three, they'll give you sort of a scope of work for the implementation of the site. We need this many images, this size, this content, that content. And then you work with the designer and the brand specialist to say, how do we best populate these areas of the pages based on what our guests want, what our data tells you about what we should have on the new site.
and how we want to get people to see things, notify people things effectively.
Yeah. And going back to integrations, I forgot about this one, and I shouldn't have because it was on my list. Social media. You know, we want to make sure that the site shows the stuff from social. So there's a place where people can go to, especially on smaller screens, to see what's going on in Silt this weekend. Well, they posted it on Facebook or wherever, so they can go there and get it, but they can go right from our site. Those types of integrations are going to be critical.
Is there such a thing as a calendar option that would allow them to sign up and get connected with their own calendars on their Google?
Absolutely.
I think that
I
would
would
be-
bet all three of these platforms have a proprietary calendar,
Yeah.
for sure.
Calendar, we talked internally about the fact that the calendar is gonna be an important aspect of the website. You ought to be able to look at a calendar and go, okay, there's a board meeting, okay, there's planning and zoning, okay, there's this, there's that, there's a party at the pavilion.
Well, yeah, in practice, they'll end up being 4 or 5 calendars. You'll have one for sporting events, you'll have one for community events, you'll have one for government proceedings, blah, blah, blah.
Is there a way where you can do it by event or by type, by
Yes.
calendar or by just event and say add to Google?
Yes.
I've seen
I'm
that
sure.
on some, so you don't have to kind of absorb the entire thing necessarily, unless you want to.
Yes, you create separate calendars for each one, and each one has its own link. So each one will have a button next to it.
Which calendar?
Click, and then it gives you the URL. You copy it into your own email or calendar program, and you're good to go.
Right.
But it's important to not try to have everything on one calendar.
'Cause otherwise it's just all
That's
noise.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they'll get lost in the minutia of everything.
Yeah. Too many.
You know, link to the, waste management, their trash pickup one, things like that.
It should
You know,
just show
just
their
have it,
trash
yeah,
pickup,
have it
yeah.
all there.
Water
Let them add it at their own discretion. I want to know about events. I want to know when my trash is getting picked up. I don't care about this government crap. Let them make that distinction.
Well, and like the
Yeah.
trash pickup is an example of something where I think someone will go find it and then they'll maybe bookmark it, so we make it logically findable.
Sure.
But not like, that's not what we open with. We open with a nice,
Yeah.
tourist attracting type imagery.
You know, open,
Right.
right on the front page, the trash trucks driving through.
Right, that's there somewhere, accessible for people.
I don't even think we need pictures of the trash at all. Just a calendar telling what days.
You guys,
That's good.
is that
Yeah.
enough?
Yeah.
I don't have anything to add. I mean, I like Glenwood's and Newcastle's are real easy to navigate just because when I was looking for rules on dogs, several months ago, it was really easy to find all the rules and everything. But for some reason, Rifle, even though it's a Civic Plus one, it was a pain to find the rules on dogs for whatever reason. So anyway,
That's
my
where
2
those
cents.
agents are going to become more and more handy. No one's going to go to menus anymore. They're just going to click on the agent prompt and say, show me X, or I want to do Y or Z. They're not going to surf around your site anymore.
Gotta know what you want,
They-
what you
Just
need.
give me what I want and go away.
And just so you're aware, we have filed Silt, Center of the Known Universe as our tagline, just
Okay.
cause.
Wow, I like that. It's my philosophy for life. No, I'm kidding for myself. No. With that being said,
So it sounds like you guys have enough direction on next steps.
Yeah, I think
guess
so.
We can end our work session early and
We can.
take a longer break. Because we can't start the public meeting
You
early.
cannot start
We gotta
till
do that at
7
7,
p.m.
so.
But the work session is designed to be done in 5 minutes, even though we don't always succeed.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll just call it 5 minutes early then. Reconvene at 7.
Reconvene at 7 for the
Okay.
regular meeting.
I will
Thank
go
you.
grab my cell phone because I forgot it.